Hello and welcome to today's Mind Your Career webinar program. My name is Adam Sylvain and I work with the Alumni Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled How to Get Press for Your Startup. Today we will hear from booth alumna Sofia Matveeva. Sofia is the founder of Enti, a retail tech platform that connects consumers, stylists, and brands. The company won App of the Day by Mashable, and Grazia named Enti one of the world's best fashion tech startups. Sofia has contributed to the Financial Times and The Guardian on entrepreneurship and has a regular column in Forbes. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to cede the floor to Sofia.
Hi, hello. I'm assuming everybody can hear me and everybody can see me, so let's get started. So, who am I and why am I here? So that was a super flattering introduction by Adam. So actually, when you're speaking, when you're hearing from me, you're actually hearing from three different points of view. One is that I started my career in one of the top financial PR agencies in London. So that was the PR experience. After that, I joined Chicago Booth, and that's when I started running my own startup. And so I've been focused on getting press for my own startup without a PR agency. And then the third person that essentially you're hearing from is someone who gets pitched to by startups because I have my regular column on Forbes and because I've written for the press quite a lot myself. So essentially, I'm going to be talking to you as somebody who used to do PR, as somebody who's been a client of PR agencies, and as somebody who is also a journalist. I'm a repeat offender at the University of Chicago. I went there for college, spent a year there when I was doing a year abroad, and I loved it so much that I came back to do my MBA. So let's get started. PR is one aspect of the whole promotion spectrum. And I know this is going to be really obvious to some of you, but it might not be obvious to everybody. So I just want to explain that when you're talking about the press, you're talking about what in the jargon is called earned media, as opposed to paid or shared or owned. That means that earned media is essentially what you earn by being interesting, by reaching out to other people. So it's what other people write about you. It's what journalists, it's what bloggers, it's what influencers write about you. It is not the same as advertising when you create a message and you pay somebody to put it into some kind of nice writing and pay to have distributed. This is different. So you never actually control press coverage. The only thing you can do is influence it. And this is what we're talking about. Control, that's advertising, that's your social media to some extent. PR is about influence rather than control. So this is what Richard Branson has to say about PR. Publicity is absolutely critical. A good PR story is infinitely more effective than a front page ad. It's precisely because if you're paying somebody to say wonderful things about you, which is essentially what advertising does, people aren't going to believe you. You know, if you just put out adverts saying that you're wonderful, that is far less believable than an op-ed in the New York Times saying that you're wonderful. But if you're dealing with a journalist in the New York Times and they're reviewing the product, they're reviewing your product, you don't know what they're actually going to write about you. So once you start dealing with the press, you start losing control because they might talk to you, they might interview you, and the interview might end up saying, well, yeah, spoke to this person. It's yet another one of those. We expect it to be around in the market for a couple of years maximum. You didn't know that. You didn't know that this is the way things were going to turn out when you were first having the interview. But it is precisely because of this risk that if they do actually say something good about you, then that's matters so much more because that's believable. So I want to tell you in this webinar about how I got press coverage for the company that I run. And now I also advise other companies on how to get press coverage and marketing for them. So essentially, there are two aspects to it. One is articles by others. So you'll see that CNBC did a piece about us, the Evening Standard in London did a piece about us. That's articles by others and articles by me. So you'll see an example of my Forbes column there and an example of me writing for the Financial Times. So they're actually very, very similar, because when you are writing op-eds, so that's opinion editorials in the press, or somebody is writing about you, the same thing has happened. Somebody has had to decide to put you in the newspaper. So an editor in the Financial Times decided that what I had to say was interesting enough that she allowed me to publish an article in the Financial Times. Equally, when I'm pitching a story to, say, CNBC over here, that journalist in CNBC decided that the story that I was telling her about was going to be interesting enough that enough people were going to read it that it would be useful for them. So before we move on, I just want to find out a little bit about who I'm dealing with over here and how much you guys know about PR and press, and how much you've dealt with it before. So Adam, could we run our first poll, please? Do we have a poll? Do we have an answer? Do we have? Okay. For some reason our poll isn't working, so let's continue to how I would suggest that you approach getting press coverage. So when I think about getting press coverage, essentially, whether it's you writing for somebody or somebody writing about you, the first thing you need to do is you need to know what you want. You know, that's the case with PR as much as it is with life in general. So do you want to be known as a great consumer leader? Do you want to be known as a great SaaS provider? Do you want to be known as a lobbyist? Then start small. Your first piece of coverage is unlikely to be in the New York Times. Always stay interesting. Respect and know who you're talking to. Produce content and build relationships. Now we're going to go through each one of them in detail. So this is what I call Financial Times versus Oprah. When you are deciding who you want to pitch your story to, think about why you actually want to have the story out. So, I mean, there are aspects. It is nice. It is nice when you're in the press. Honestly, when somebody sees an article about you and sends you a message saying, I opened the paper and there you were, it feels really, really good. And while, you know, happiness is important, this is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about helping your business. So what do you want a piece of press coverage to achieve? So, for example, if you are running a startup and you want to get investment in your business, you want to be seen, you want investors to hear about you. So you need to think about what newspapers are investors reading. So it's going to be probably the Wall Street Journal, it's going to be the Financial Times. If you're in tech, it's probably going to be TechCrunch. If you are doing a consumer app and you want to target women in their 20s, then Refinery 29 is probably an example. If you want to convince somebody to invade rogue state, Foreign Affairs is your choice. The reason why I'm saying this is don't go in your thinking process, don't go from where do I want my name to appear. Think about what do I want this article to do. Start small. So I'm hoping that I'd rather impressed you with my Financial Times and Forbes articles, but honestly, guys, this is not how it started. The way it started actually is here. So you will see there's my face, and above it says condoms. This was me giving an interview to a website that sells vegan condoms. Now, I have nothing to do with selling vegan condoms, so why was I doing it? The reason why I was doing it is right at the beginning of NC's journey. Nobody cared. Nobody cared about what I had to say. Nobody cared about the company, and you know, the people that did care, they couldn't get their editors to care. But I was absolutely determined that we were going to get coverage anywhere and everywhere. So literally, I pitched myself to everything. So when you're at the start of your journey, it actually pays off to pitch to small publications, to pitch to company websites, to pitch to company newsletters, because you'll end up getting a lot of content about you on Google. And yeah, of course, it's better if the content about you is in the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times. But before you get there, is having content with your interviews that calls you an inspirational, interesting person. That is better than, even if it's on a vegan condom website, that is better than nothing. And so you can actually get quite a lot of press coverage that way. So the way I think about it is write for the blogs of other companies. Lots of companies would have their own blog and their own newsletter. Entrepreneurship is now really in fashion. So if you start offering out your advice on how to be an entrepreneur, or resilience tips and things like that, you'll generally be able to get some coverage. Also, then think about what's your specific area of expertise. And when you think of your specific area of expertise, then go to the trade publications where you could write articles about that. Because essentially, once you start pitching yourself to the bigger publications, they want to see that you know how to give an interview, they know that you're an interesting person, and that somebody has pre-vetted you first. It is highly, highly unlikely that the New York Times is going to allow you to write something for them unless they can already Google and see how you've written for other people, even if those people, in my case, are a vegan condom website. So this is the most important bit, is that you have to be interesting. So I'm going to show you some examples of what I think is good and what I think is terrible. So this is a pitch that somebody sent me asking me to cover them in Forbes. Don't worry, you don't have to read about it. Just give you a couple of minutes so you can indulge in the horror. So the reason why I'm saying don't do this is that, first of all, it's too long. Honestly, I think I read it once, I skimmed over it, and I decided it was boring, and I didn't really pay any attention. That's reason one. Reason two, it doesn't actually say anything. Okay, so you're a startup, you're doing something somewhere far away. Great. But how is that going to impact anything? Not only why would I want to write about this, why as a reader would I want to know about this? If I can't even be bothered to read your email, I'm probably not going to be that interested in writing about what you have to say. So don't write boring emails just saying that you exist. What you should do instead is approach it the way you would approach, essentially trying to impress somebody at a party. So, if there's somebody you meet, I don't know, they are of the opposite sex, and they're very good looking, or they're very charming, or they're the cool person of the group that you want to fit in with. Think about how you would want to relate with them. You would want to be funny, you would want to be human, you would want to say that you're kind of smart, that what you're saying has some relevance to what they might be interested in. So when we first got our article in the BBC, the BBC didn't particularly care about just another startup. Okay, so it's woman founded. Like, nobody really cares about that anymore, honestly. So it was actually this phrase that I sat in my underwear in a changing room for ages that got the headline. Why did I get the headline? It's because this is a technology correspondent for the BBC. A lot of the time when he is writing about technology, he is writing about industry, he is writing about SaaS, he is writing about Microsoft. And all of a sudden he gets a legitimate reason to write about people sitting around in their underwear for ages waiting for their friends to give them feedback on their outfit. So that makes his job more fun, more interesting, and so then I get a piece of press coverage. When actually there wasn't, I would say this article was more the result of a clever turn of phrase rather than a story that was going to be super impactful or super interesting. So as well as being interesting, you need to remember who you are being interesting to. So, for example, what's going to be interesting to one person is going to be different, is not going to be interesting to a different person. If we go back to this horrendous thing, this person has clearly not done any research about me, about what my interests and what I write about. This is literally saying me, and more me. And oh yeah, by the way, I'd like to be in Forbes. Okay, well that's great. What you should do instead is research the reporter that you're reaching out to. Most journalists are on Twitter. If they're not on Twitter, then that's going to be really, really rare. So basically, your first port of call is have a look on Twitter, then have a look on LinkedIn. But really, Twitter should give you a very, very quick idea. Have a look at their bio, like what they say they're interested in. But really, if you want to be super good, you then look at the content that they've written before, and then you start pitching to them. So look what they've written about. Ideally, you can also find out about their hobbies. You can find out where they've been posted before, what they've written about, and what their views are. So you'll often see what technologies or what trends journalists are following, and then that way you write a pitch to them that you know is going to be relevant. For some reason, I mean, you're University of Chicago alumni, so you're some of the smartest people in the world. But for some reason, I see people who are generally good at sales and generally kind of good networkers, but for some reason, when they get to the press, they get really, really shy, and then they kind of just lose it, and then they just start kind of vomiting all this information onto a person. Don't do that. Just react the way you would react when you're meeting an interesting person at a party. Yes, you want to pique their interest, but if you're just telling them about your company and why you're great and that you spoke at this conference, that person's probably not going to want to go for a drink with you. So it is exactly the same if you're pitching to a journalist for a story. So listen to them and respond. So producing content for me, for example, has been super, super useful. But before we move on, I just want to have a go. I just want to have another go with our poll.
Absolutely. Yep. Can you hear me, Sophia? I'm happy to deploy that poll for you. Which one would you like?
Yeah. So let's start with the first one.
Okay. So that first poll question, asking our audience, do you run a company? And your options here are yes or no. Give all our folks here a few seconds to respond, and then I'll share out those results.
Yeah, so it's really for me to get to understand who I'm dealing with, what kind of experience you guys have of dealing with the press.
All right, so it looks like we have about 71% who are who do own their own company, and 29% who do not.
Great. So could you just continue with all those questions, the introductory questions?
Absolutely.
From poll one.
All right, so our next question, have you ever hired a PR firm? Again, just yes or no for this one. Give our attendees a few seconds. All right, and so for this question, we had 16% of our respondents say yes to that question, and we had 84% who have not hired a PR firm.
Okay, so let's continue with the next question.
Alrighty, and our last question here, have you ever been in the press? Again, yes or no, and we'll give a few seconds for this third question. All right, we had a pretty even split on this last question. So we have 55% who have been in the press and 45% that have not.
Okay, almost like Brexit. Cool. Okay, so now that I have a better picture of my audience, let's this is really helpful, thank you. So one of the things that I would say, if you're right at the beginning and you've either not had any press yet, or you've had a little bit, but you're not yet established enough that you don't have a regular writing slot, you don't have regular relationships with journalists, what I would say start by doing is start producing content. So the first thing to do, I would advise, is produce content where you can publish it. So in general, that's LinkedIn and Medium. LinkedIn and Medium are better for you to produce content on than on your own company website, because LinkedIn and Medium are platforms that already have an audience. So when you publish something, people are more likely to see it. If you just put it out onto the web, a lot of the time you might as well not have published anything at all. So the good thing about producing content is that the people that you're trying to impress in your business, so not the press, but your potential clients, your employees, whoever that is, investors, users, they will get to know you, they'll get to know your points of view. That's always useful. But then, as I was saying, once you start pitching yourself to write for other people, you need to have a bank of pretty relevant press coverage. Or you need to have a bank of relevant things that shows that you're a good writer. So the first thing to do is do it in a place that you can control. After that, after you've created some things on Medium, some things on LinkedIn, then you can start pitching to trade publications. So, for example, one of my earlier trade publications was basically a blog called Social Media Today. So, Social Media Today writes about social media trends, obviously. They accept free content from people, so you still have to pitch. If they accept your article, you'll have a byline, and you'll have your article out, but they're not going to pay you. So it's a great business model for them, but it also means that you've got validation that your views are now being published by somebody else. After that, after you've done that enough times, you can basically move up the food chain. So from Social Media Today to maybe a slightly bigger blog to maybe a local newspaper, and eventually from local newspapers to national newspapers. So we're just going to do another poll. So when we're talking about producing content, you've got to remember to stay interesting. So let's just have a look at these two articles, and these two headlines rather, and I'd like you to choose which one of them you are going to read. So option 1, option 2. Adam, can we run a poll? Which one of these articles would our UChicago alumni prefer to read?
Absolutely. Yep. So that poll just launched. So option 1 or option 2, please register your responses and I'll share out the results in just a few seconds. All right, we have an overwhelming majority, 93%, that would much prefer option 2 to option 1.
I'm really curious who this person is who wants to read about Jenny Tooth. You have to give me a call. I just want to meet you and I want to know why. I mean, honestly, I don't know who Jenny Tooth is, but she should be really, really angry with the fact that her name is being just abused in this horrible, horrible headline. So I got both of these today. So one of them is from a blog from the UK Business Angels Association, and the other one is from Medium. Now, the reason why option 1 is such a horror is not just because we don't know who Jenny Tooth is, but we know who George Orwell is. That's not the reason. It's that the headline is long, and it's some unknown person talking about something. Who cares? The headline that most of us prefer is, yes, interesting person, but it actually tells you how, if you read this article, what good things are going to happen to you. So if you read this article, you're going to learn how to write. So that basically means that it becomes self-selective. If you want to learn how to write, you're going to read this article. If you don't want to learn how to write, if you just want to watch Netflix, then you're not going to want to read this article. This Jenny Tooth disaster, you don't even know what it is. So you like, maybe it's a brilliant article, but you're just not going to bother finding out. So essentially, we're going back to the same point that if you're creating content, whether you're pitching to a journalist, you're writing on your own blog, you are writing for somebody else's blog, just be interesting and be useful. So this is the most important thing. In your relationships with journalists and in the content that you're creating, because it's all part of the same continuum. Relationships with journalists and content that you're creating is basically your relations with the public. It works when you are giving people something useful. Useful can either be, these are your tips to achieve X, Y, Z. Useful can be because it's entertaining and it's fun. Fun is useful. Useful can be, this is how I am interpreting a trend that is coming and this is how you can get ready for it. But the more useful stuff you're putting out, whether on your blog or whether pitching to journalists, the more success you're going to have. So when I think about PR, I always think of playing the long game. So, for example, there are some journalists that I have known for 3 years before they would even do a tiny article about me. Other times, I would just come across a journalist on Twitter, we would have a quick exchange, and all of a sudden, I had a comment in the Wall Street Journal. That actually happened. That was an accident. That was a happy accident. I'm really delighted that it happened, but you can't. It's a bit like planning your retirement on winning the lottery. You can't do that. So what is more likely to happen, and what's happened in my case, in the case of the startups of advice, is that it's going to be a long journey, and it's often going to feel quite unsatisfactory. So in general, what I would advise you to do is, if you decide what kind of publications you want to be featured in. So for example, when we go back to the Financial Times versus Oprah situation, you have decided you want to get press, you want to get covered in the business press because you want to be established as the best provider of software for schools. And the reason why you want that is because you want more and more schools to buy your software. So you're going to be very specific about the kinds of applications you want to get to. So yes, you want the Financial Times, but also, and the Wall Street Journal, but also what you really want are going to be the publications that are read by schools and by people who finance schools. That's really what you're going to want. So then you find out what those publications are. And then you start finding out who are the people who are working in those publications. And then you see, are they accepting commissions? So can you, as an expert in the field, not as a journalist, but as a practitioner, can you offer them a free article? a free article that is going to be useful to their readers. So, for example, an article on the best innovations in SaaS for education and how you can start using it today. After you have started pitching, a lot of the times the answer that you will get is no, but that is okay, because this is the long-term game of relationship building. Because essentially what you are doing here is you have shown to people that you know what you want to say to them. You know what they're interested in, and you're showing them that you're making an effort for them. And you keep on coming back with useful information, and probably for about 75% of the time, they'll either politely say no or they'll just ignore you. That is okay, because eventually it is possible that they will say yes. So when you're building a relationship, don't again think of you're at this party and you meet somebody who's super, super cool, and you know that I don't know, for example, that they're this like super cool Hollywood A-lister and they're really fun, and you're not going to say to them, oh my God, I love your movies. I was just wondering, can I be your +1 to the Oscars? You're not going to, I mean, if you do that and it works, like, you should be giving the presentation, not me. Most of the time, that's not going to work, and you shouldn't do that. Instead, you are going to want to form a friendship with this person, and then eventually hope that they'll invite you to the Oscars. So it's the same thing. Play the long game, carry on being useful, and also remember, with journalists, a lot of the time they are generalists and you're a specialist. So if you're a journalist for one of the top newspapers in the world, newspapers or publications in the world, you are going to be really smart. You're going to be probably underpaid, and you're going to be overworked. When we're now in the 24-hour news cycle, journalists are having to create more and more content than they've ever had before. Journalists that only used to write for newspapers are now having to do video, and I know plenty of journalists who basically never thought that they'll be in front of the screen, now having to be in front of the screen, which they really, really don't want to do. So you're dealing with people who are smart, who are overworked, who are underpaid, and a lot of the time they're going to be really, really grateful if you can make their lives easier. So how can you make their lives easier? You can make their lives easier by making relevant introductions. Sometimes that is making relevant introductions to your competitors. I have actually done that. Sometimes it's explaining things that may seem obvious to you, but are not obvious to them. But explain it to them in a way that isn't condescending. So then, the benefits of having a relationship with a journalist is that you can then end up getting a lot more press coverage, because the press coverage is not going to be about you. The press coverage is going to be about event X happening, and you are the commentator explaining why that event matters. So this is something that I would really, really recommend. And a lot of the time, this is how you can start building your creds with bigger publications, because this is more likely, this kind of you first offering comment on something interesting happening is more likely to happen at the beginning than you getting a big spread about what a great entrepreneur you are and what a wonderful company you run. So I know we'll be doing Q&A shortly, but I think that this next bit for me is actually really, really important. So let's say like the best thing happens. So I don't know. Maybe like an article in the New York Times. I'm assuming that's going to be a really kind of a great thing for most people. So if that happens, you'll have some nice things happen. So for example, your friends will message you and tell you how impressed they are. People will tag you on Facebook. That's going to be great. Okay. Maybe you will get some clients, and maybe some good things will happen, but really, it is still not very likely that somebody is going to read this article about you, and then it's pretty unlikely that Richard Branson is going to read this article about you and then pick up the phone and call you up and say, oh my God, you're amazing. Can you come with me to my private island and let's just start building companies together? And that would be amazing, but I've had a lot of press coverage and that has never happened to me. So, well, some nice things happen is that they're actually like not that big. The thing that really matters more is you take the press coverage and then you promote it. So you take your New York Times article, you post it all over your company properties. So you post it on your website, you post it on your LinkedIn, you send it out to people. Assuming this is obviously assuming the article is positive. You can then put it at the bottom of your email. So, for example, you can say, "As seen in the New York Times." This, as seen in the New York Times, will never ever go away. It will never leave you. So, not only do you send it out on the day and basically for days to come, you make it part of your story and you make it part of your creds. So, for example, I've seen lots and lots of startup presentations that say "as seen in." Maybe it's as seen in literally 3 years ago, but it doesn't matter. Like now you've got that press coverage, you've actually had some validation. Also, because press coverage is that external validation from people whom you have not paid. Do you remember we were talking about that risky aspect? That means that it basically adds more credentials to whatever kind of sale you want to make. And when I'm talking about sales, I'm not only talking about selling your services or selling your goods. I'm talking about selling your equity to get investors, selling trust so you get loans, selling yourself as a boss so you get really great employees. Employees are always going to be quite naturally nervous of startups. So if you can say that your startup has been seen some way useful, that employee is going to take you much more seriously. So essentially, the most important, I would say, if you've done all of this work and you finally got your startup featured, carry on using that press coverage basically for as long as is reasonable. And as long as is reasonable can literally be 3 to 5 years. So once you achieve this aim, you can basically carry on using it for a long, long time. So just before we go to Q&A, if you guys want to sign up to my mailing list to essentially get more of these tips, please go to my website, which is sofiamatveva.com. But if you want to have a closer chat about about some of these things, then get in touch on Sophia@NTApp, and I've advised some investors and some startups and some accelerators, including our very own Chicago booth New Venture Challenge, and some of those clients are below. Essentially on technology strategy and getting press coverage and marketing. So, Adam, shall we open it up to questions?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And if you do have a question and you haven't submitted it yet, do make sure that you submit that question to the questions box in the control panel. But I'm going to jump right in since we have about a little more than 10 minutes here for Q&A. So our first question, as a CEO, what fraction of your time goes to product, hiring, fundraising, online, offline marketing, and PR? So I guess, yeah, how does the pie sort of get broken down there?
I just need to, because there were a few things. So we've got product, marketing,
hiring, fundraising,
hiring.
online, offline marketing, and PR.
Okay. I mean, the answer that I'm going to give you doesn't necessarily, it's just what I do, and the fact that I do it does not mean that it's necessarily the right thing to do. But when you're fundraising takes up so much of your time. It really, I mean, it's a cliche to call it a distraction, but it's a cliche for a reason because it's true. So if you possibly can, do it quickly, or don't do it at all, or raise a lot of money quickly and then just stop. I mean, if you can do that, that would be amazing. Because basically, when you're fundraising, everything else ends up almost being a nice to have, but it's a disaster for your business, and then your team hates you. Then I think essentially the way I think of a company is essentially two bits. you need somebody to make the product and you need somebody to sell the product. So making the product is how much do I spend time on it? Well, ideally, especially at the beginning, it should be about half. Selling the product, that is marketing, that's online, that's offline, that's PR. It depends on where you are with the product. So right at the beginning, when you don't have anything, you should be spending more time on the product rather than on marketing, because you need to create something to market it. Eventually, once you've got a product team in place and you can set the direction, and other people, so designers, product managers, analysts, can essentially make sure that your vision is becoming a reality. You don't need to be there looking after every single aspect of the product. Because I think as a CEO, you're actually supposed to be the face of the company, and you're supposed to be doing things like hiring, like talking to investors, like talking to the press, basically making sure that your business grows. So more product right at the beginning, but then I would say moving towards more marketing as you grow in general. Any more?
Great. Yeah. So our next question, how do you manage developing relationships or reaching out when you have multiple businesses that are in slightly different sectors? This person doesn't want to be annoying, but wants to get the PR for both businesses.
So it depends on what you're attempting to do, because there are I think you could actually you could play a trick here to your advantage, is that if you get coverage for yourself as an entrepreneur in general, then by default, your two companies end up getting coverage, and you end up building relationships. So for example, let's go back to, again, Richard Branson. Richard Branson, we know him as an entrepreneur in general. We don't think of him as, okay, so he's got this train company, he's got planes, and is now going to space, and we don't think of all of that. We think fun entrepreneur, which actually is a very thought out strategy by him, because he thought, I'm going to be a person who creates companies. So I'm going to use myself, and if I get press coverage, that means all the things that I touch essentially get press coverage by default through me. So I would think about, where can you be seen as an entrepreneur? So where can you write articles about entrepreneurship, about what it's like to run two companies, about why you started two companies, about how you manage your sanity running two companies? Most people can't even manage one, and there you are managing two. That's something interesting. And not only write, but also see where you can speak. Where can you get speaking opportunities? Again, as the entrepreneur. And from that, you can see where interest develop. Because if you start getting a conversation about you as an entrepreneur, and you see that one person is more drawn to one company and another journalist is drawn to another company, you basically see where the conversation goes and you let them direct you. But because entrepreneurship right now is so fashionable and startups are so fashionable, you can actually get quite a lot of coverage just for being an entrepreneur. I mean, start with a vegan condom website, build up from there. Any more?
Yes, absolutely. We've actually got a few that are somewhat related, so I'm going to try and kind of group them together here. But we've got a few that have asked about advice around specifically what to include in that cold pitch email. I think you shared some really good examples of good emails and not so great emails, but we had one attendee asking, what exactly should be included in that email when cold pitching? What is the specific ask you recommend in a cold first email with a journalist?
So first of all, keep it super short. Keep it super short and have bullet points if you can. So those are your two tips. Also say why it's relevant and why it's interesting. So the traditional press release, which is we are company X and we have created a new pen. That doesn't work anymore. I mean, it works if you're Facebook, but you know, I'm assuming that Mark Zuckerberg is not on this call. So if you are not already a huge company, you can't just get away with, here I am and here are my news. So what you need to do is show why this news is relevant and why this is interesting. So if you've got something hugely newsworthy, like we have developed a cure for lung cancer, okay, you're going to get some interest. But if it's something not as clear, you really need to show why it's relevant. So is it the first, have you created something that lots of other people tried to create and they failed, but you managed to do it? Or do you have some kind of well-known famous person that is an investor or a client? Basically, what is the news hook? Don't ever do a pitch saying, this is me, I would love to be featured. No, it's this is me, this is why I am relevant. Would you like, and essentially then it depends what you're pitching. Would you like to have a call? Or can I write for you? So those are the points that I would make. So keep it short. If you can, use bullet points, so it's very easy to see for these time-starved people. Explain to them why you are relevant, and then ask if they want to have a call to follow up, or if you can write for them. But make sure it's super short. And also, don't worry about following up. So in general, if you possibly can, write them an email, and then if you've got their phone number, maybe give them a call the next day, or write to them on Twitter. Don't do it too much, but if you send one email and then maybe you kind of follow up with a tweet a few hours later, that's reasonable, because you are dealing with people who are getting so many pitches. Sometimes they miss things that they don't want to have missed. But don't do it so much that essentially they don't even want to pick up the phone to you, because once they do, then you'll never stop. Hope that helps. Any more questions?
Yes, we have a few more, and I think time for probably a couple more questions. We had a few attendees asking about whether you do all of this outreach yourself, and if you do, or if you don't, what you would recommend in terms of folks who might be interested in exploring the idea of hiring a consultant to reach out to the press. One attendee mentioned that they had received an estimate of like $300 to $500 an hour to hire a PR consultant to get more press coverage. This person was wondering if that's an accurate estimate, and just what are your thoughts generally on hiring out for some of this work?
So I have hired both in my company, and I used to work in a private equity firm, so I hired for them, and also I've done it myself. So I mean, I hate to say it, but the best results came from when I was doing it myself. But that's not a good attitude to have if you're running a company, because you can't go around doing everything yourself. Because if you're doing everything yourself, you don't have a company, you just have you. So I would say do it yourself as much as you can, and then at some point you're just going to have to get somebody to help you. I did have somebody helping me, but it didn't work out. And it didn't work out because I don't think that person really, I don't think they understood what we want. I don't think they understood the way the media had moved on. I think they grew up in a slightly in more analog media, and so when we were talking about being in Refinery 29, they didn't quite understand what we're talking about, which also is a hiring fault with me, frankly. So in terms of the quote, that sounds reasonable. It obviously depends where you are, because a London price or a New York price is going to be different from the Delhi price. But kind of London prices, this is what I know to be true. Now, in general, what my advice is, if you're hiring PR companies, ask them for a pitch. So ask them how they would promote your story. So what would they say? So essentially, what are the news hooks that they think would make you interesting? So basically, ask them for the key messages. Then evaluate whether those key messages, whether they sound interesting to you and whether they're actually true to your company. Then ask where they would pitch you to. So you want to have a mixture of ambition and reality. Reality is, in my case, social media today. Ambition, Financial Times. So if they just tell you, oh, we're going to get you into CNBC and you're going to be in Squawk Box and Bloomberg and you're going to be all over Times Square, then don't believe them. It's just basically, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. But then if they only say to you, you're only going to be in these local publications for that price, also you've got to think like, well, you gotta do some work. And also, you can't. Hiring PR agencies, I think, is tricky if you've never worked in PR, because a PR person should never say to you, we guarantee you articles in these publications, because the whole point is that it's about influence. Influence is not the same as control. If a PR person says to you, I guarantee you articles in these publications, they are lying and don't do business with liars. But if they say to you, well, there's nothing that we can guarantee, and kind of just pay us and just see what happens, that's also not great. In a way, you're doing that, but if you do hire somebody, essentially expect them to deliver something every month. Sometimes they're not going to be able to deliver your dream coverage. Okay, if they can't deliver your dream coverage, if they can't get you to the New York Times, that's okay. They should be getting into lots and lots of blogs. Even if you're not getting lots of eyeballs in prestigious publications, then they should be getting you into the local press. I have a friend who is very smart but does not know anything about hiring PR agencies, and he hired somebody who did not deliver any coverage for 8 months. And when he told me this, I said, look, you're being completely ripped off. That is completely unacceptable. You should be getting something every month. I hope that helps, and good luck. If you have any questions, message me.
All right, I think our last question here, we had a few attendees asking about the relative value of publishing on LinkedIn versus Medium, and kind of what the key differences are, the value proposition of, I guess, using one or both of those platforms to publish content.
So it's all about audience. So, by the way, LinkedIn and Medium are good for B2B audiences. If you are trying to do something very, very consumer, then actually basically Instagram and creating your own blogs and doing SEO is actually still a good idea. But for B2B, LinkedIn and Medium. The Medium audience tends to be focused on technology. So you have a lot of developers there and a lot of people talking about various different aspects of tech. So product management, user experience design, all the way down to like which programming language is best for solving what kind of problems. So technology and entrepreneurship are and there are quite a few venture capitalists on Medium. So basically, if you want to talk about or you want to be read by investors, entrepreneurs, and tech people, Medium is really, really good. And the website is actually really beautiful. So when you create things, it's easy to create things that look nice, and that is important. LinkedIn is a general business audience, so it's a much bigger audience than Medium, but it is also general. So I sometimes think that things are going to get lost. on LinkedIn, and also Medium has a much better promotion mechanism. My advice in general is, if you're going to be putting stuff out on Medium, you can either completely replicate it on LinkedIn, or you can at least post your Medium article on LinkedIn. You can essentially do a post about it. For LinkedIn, your stuff will get read, but who it's read by depends on who is in your network. So people in your network will know about it, but will new people find out about it? I'm not sure. I don't think LinkedIn is as good for discovery as Medium. But technology changes really quickly. So ask me in about 3 months' time, and that might change. Guys, I know that we've just run out of time. So you've got my email address here. Message me. I'll try to answer questions. And if there is more interest, then we can hold a kind of a follow-up Q&A that we can do on another webinar, which doesn't necessarily need to have UChicago support. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope that this was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you to everyone for participating. We hope that you can join us next week, Wednesday, October 23rd at 12 p.m. for our next webinar entitled 10 Coaching Skills Every Leader Should Master. I also invite you to save the date for Career Month coming in November. From November 4th through November 21st, we'll be hosting a month of programming to help you grow, network, and pivot in your career. And actually, you can hear from Sophia again with her webinar during Career Month on November 7th. She'll be presenting on how to create and grow your personal brand. So I definitely want to plug that event. You can visit our events page at careers.uchicagoalumni.org for our most up-to-date schedule of events. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Sophia.
Thank you.